The entire restaurant fell silent the moment Vincent Moretti ordered every guard, politician, and businessman out of the private room, because nobody had ever seen the feared Mafia boss care about anyone's child before. Chicago's winter rain hammered against the tall black windows of Moretti's private club, like fists demanding entry. The storm blurred the city lights outside, turning the skyline into a distorted painting of gold and shadow. Inside the restaurant, however, everything remained painfully controlled. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Expensive liquor glowed behind glass walls. Wealthy politicians laughed quietly beside mafia captains pretending to discuss business, while millions of illegal dollars moved beneath the surface of every conversation. Claire Bennett moved silently between tables, carrying silver trays that felt heavier every night. She had learned long ago that invisible people survived longer. At 28 years old, Claire looked emotionally exhausted in ways expensive makeup could never hide. Years of unpaid bills, endless double shifts, and sleepless nights raising a child alone had carved permanent tension beneath her eyes. Chicago had never been kind to women like her. Single mothers working in places owned by dangerous men rarely received sympathy. They survived quietly or disappeared quietly. Claire understood both possibilities. The private club existed beneath one of downtown Chicago's most luxurious hotels, though the public never saw the lower levels. Officially, the club hosted elite business gatherings. In reality, senators, judges, traffickers, and organized crime leaders used the restaurant to negotiate deals hidden from the world above ground. Claire hated every second she worked there, but her 6-year-old son Noah needed medication, school tuition, and food. Fear paid better than honesty in Chicago. The staff around her moved nervously that evening because Vincent Moretti himself had arrived. Even whispering his name made people uncomfortable. Vincent Moretti controlled most of Chicago's criminal empire through fear rather than violence alone. Stories about him traveled through the city like urban legends. Rival mafia bosses vanished after private meetings. Corrupt officials obeyed him before he even spoke. Entire police investigations disappeared overnight whenever his organization became involved. Nobody looked Vincent directly in the eyes unless invited. Claire had never served him personally before, but she immediately recognized the atmosphere changing the moment he entered the club. The guards stood straighter. Politicians lowered their voices. Even the managers looked terrified. Vincent sat at the center table inside the private dining chamber, surrounded by powerful men pretending they were equals. Yet everyone inside the room understood the truth. Vincent Moretti did not share power. He allowed others to temporarily borrow safety. Claire avoided looking toward him while serving wine. That changed the moment Noah's bracelet slipped from her pocket. The small silver bracelet crashed softly against the marble floor beside Vincent's chair. For one dangerous second, the room became completely silent. Claire's heart nearly stopped. The bracelet belonged to Noah. He had made it at school from cheap silver beads and blue thread. Claire carried it during long shifts because guilt followed her everywhere. Whenever she left him alone with neighbors at night, she immediately bent down to grab it. But Vincent reached it first. The entire table froze as the feared mafia boss lifted the bracelet slowly into his hand. Claire expected anger. Instead, Vincent stared at the bracelet with something far more unsettling: recognition. A senator near the table shifted nervously. One of Vincent's guards exchanged uncomfortable glances with another man near the door. Claire noticed all of it. Vincent's expression remained emotionally unreadable, but something cold moved behind his eyes. "Who does this belong to?" he finally asked calmly. His voice barely rose above a whisper, yet nobody inside the room dared breathe. Claire forced herself to answer carefully. "My son." The atmosphere changed instantly, not because she answered, because Vincent looked disturbed by the answer. One of the older politicians laughed awkwardly and muttered something about poor women bringing personal problems into professional environments. Another wealthy guest quietly insulted Claire under his breath, assuming nobody important would care enough to defend a waitress. The insult carried traces of class hatred and subtle racism that Claire had endured her entire life. Normally, she ignored such things. Tonight became different. Vincent slowly lifted his eyes toward the politician responsible for the comment. The older man immediately stopped speaking. Fear spread visibly across the table. Nobody rescued powerful men once Vincent focused on them. The Mafia boss gently placed the bracelet onto the table before speaking again. "Leave us." The room stayed frozen. Several guards hesitated, clearly unsure they heard correctly. Vincent never repeated himself often, but when he did, people usually died afterward. "Everyone leaves now." Within seconds, politicians grabbed coats nervously. Security guards rushed toward exits. Businessmen avoided eye contact completely while hurrying from the private chamber. Even the restaurant manager looked terrified while escorting remaining staff members away. Claire suddenly found herself alone inside the massive dining room with Vincent Moretti. Rain hammered harder outside. The silence became unbearable. Claire tried controlling her breathing, while Vincent studied her carefully from across the table. He looked nothing like the screaming monsters described in Mafia rumors. That calmness frightened her more than violence ever could. Vincent appeared perfectly controlled, perfectly dangerous. "You have a son," he said quietly. Claire nodded once. Every survival instinct inside her demanded escape, but her legs refused movement. Vincent leaned back slowly in his chair, his expression unreadable beneath the dim chandelier light. "How old?" "6." Another silence followed. Claire noticed his guards waiting outside the glass doors, watching nervously through reflections without entering. Even they seemed uncomfortable. That terrified her most, because dangerous men only feared emotional situations they could not control. Vincent picked up the bracelet again. His thumb brushed across the tiny blue thread attached to the silver charm. Claire suddenly realized his hands carried scars. Not ordinary scars. Burn marks, knife wounds, old violence hidden beneath expensive suits. Where did he get this bracelet? Vincent asked. Claire swallowed carefully before answering. He made it at school. Vincent's jaw tightened slightly. Again, that strange look crossed his face. Not anger, not hatred, something closer to grief. Claire's confusion deepened. Why would Mafia boss care about a child's bracelet? The storm outside shook the windows violently as thunder echoed across downtown Chicago. Somewhere deeper inside the restaurant, dishes shattered from nervous staff members dropping trays. Vincent remained completely still. Claire noticed a framed photograph partially visible beside the liquor cabinet nearby. 2 young boys stood beside an older woman in the picture. One boy resembled Vincent. The other looked unfamiliar. But around the younger boy's wrist sat a silver bracelet nearly identical to Noah's. Claire's stomach tightened instantly. Vincent noticed her staring. For the first time since entering the room, real emotion crossed his face. Pain. It disappeared almost immediately. "You should not have brought that bracelet here," he said quietly. Claire's pulse quickened. "I mean, it was not an accident." His interruption came softly, but tension filled every word. Claire suddenly understood something horrifying. Vincent believed Noah mattered somehow. The realization made fear spread through her chest like ice water. She stepped backward slowly. "I don't know anything about your business," Claire whispered carefully. "My son and I are not connected to people like you." Vincent studied her for several long seconds before standing. The movement alone made Claire instinctively retreat farther. He walked toward the rain-covered windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. The city lights reflected across his dark suit, while thunder rolled through the distance. Power surrounded him naturally, not loud power, quiet power, the kind capable of destroying lives with a single phone call. "You worked here 8 months, Vincent said calmly without turning around. "Single mother, no criminal record, medical debt connected to your son's asthma treatment, 3 eviction notices in the last year." Claire felt sick. He knew everything already. "You investigated me?" Vincent ignored the question. "Your son's full name is Noah Bennett." Claire's hands trembled. Nobody gathered that much information unless something far worse was happening beneath the surface. She suddenly remembered rumors from staff members about children disappearing during Mafia, wars years earlier. She remembered whispers about Vincent's younger brother supposedly dying under mysterious circumstances. And now Vincent stared at Noah's bracelet like he had seen a ghost. Claire's fear slowly transformed into something deeper. Suspicion. "What do you want from my child?" she asked quietly. Vincent finally turned toward her. For the first time, Claire noticed exhaustion hidden beneath his cold exterior. Years of violence had hardened him, but something unfinished still haunted him deeply. Before Vincent could answer, one of his guards entered nervously without permission. The interruption alone revealed panic. The guard whispered something into Vincent's ear. Claire watched Vincent's expression darken immediately. The atmosphere shifted again. Danger returned instantly. Vincent looked toward Claire with controlled intensity. "Your son," he said slowly. "Was he ever adopted?" Claire froze. "No." "Are you certain?" The question hit harder than she expected. Claire suddenly remembered missing hospital paperwork after Noah's birth. She remembered nurses acting strangely. She remembered how quickly records disappeared whenever she asked questions years ago. Fear crawled through her chest. Vincent walked closer now, his voice lowering further. "There are people searching for something connected to your child. Dangerous people." Claire backed away again. "What are you talking about?" Vincent studied her face carefully before reaching into his coat pocket. He removed an old photograph. The image showed a younger version of Vincent standing beside his teenage brother years earlier. The younger brother wore the exact same birthmark visible beneath Noah's wrist whenever he removed his bracelet. Claire's breathing stopped. Vincent's voice became almost emotionless. "My brother disappeared 20 years ago," he said quietly. "And your son carries the same family mark the doctors claim died with him." The storm outside exploded with thunder as Claire stared at the photograph in horror. And somewhere inside the restaurant hallway beyond the private room, Vincent's guards suddenly began reaching for their weapons. Every child connected to the Moretti Empire either disappeared quietly or grew up learning how dangerous love could become. The storm over Chicago had not stopped by the time Claire Bennett and her son arrived at the Moretti estate. Rain slid across the tinted windows of the black armored SUV, while city lights disappeared farther behind them. Claire sat frozen beside Noah in the back seat, holding him tightly against her chest as armed security vehicles followed behind them through empty midnight streets. Nothing about the situation felt real anymore. Less than 2 hours earlier, she had simply been a struggling waitress trying to survive another exhausting shift. Now she was being transported to the private mansion of the most feared Mafia boss in Chicago, while armed men treated her 6-year-old son like something dangerously valuable. Noah remained half asleep against her shoulder, unaware his entire life had suddenly changed. Claire wished she could remain unaware too. The Moretti estate appeared beyond massive iron gates hidden behind rows of dead winter trees overlooking Lake Michigan. The mansion itself looked less like a home and more like a fortress built by people preparing for war. Tall stone walls surrounded the property. Surveillance cameras rotated silently above every entrance. Guards carrying military weapons patrolled the grounds despite the freezing rain. The deeper they traveled into the estate, the more Claire understood one terrifying truth. Nobody entered this place freely, and very few probably left willingly. The mansion doors opened before they fully reached the entrance. Staff members stood silently in long black uniforms, avoiding direct eye contact as Vincent Moretti stepped from another vehicle nearby. Even surrounded by armed security, Vincent moved with complete calmness. Fear followed him naturally. Claire carried Noah carefully through the massive entrance hall, while thunder echoed outside the estate. Expensive chandeliers illuminated polished marble floors. Ancient paintings covered the walls beside gold-framed family portraits. Every inch of the mansion reflected impossible wealth mixed with suffocating control. Luxury existed everywhere. So did surveillance. Claire noticed cameras hidden behind decorative mirrors almost immediately. Vincent noticed her noticing. "You'll remain here temporarily," he said calmly while removing his gloves, "until I understand why your son is connected to my family." Claire tightened her grip around Noah. "My son is not connected to criminals." Vincent looked toward her with cold patience. "That is what I am trying to determine." Noah slowly woke as servants carried luggage upstairs. His small hands wrapped around Claire instinctively while his tired eyes studied the enormous mansion nervously. Children sense danger better than adults sometimes. One older housekeeper approached carefully with blankets for Noah, but her expression shifted strangely the moment she noticed the birthmark near his wrist. Fear. The woman stepped backward immediately. Claire saw it clearly. The staff feared her child. That realization unsettled her more deeply than the armed guards surrounding the mansion. Vincent instructed another employee to escort Claire and Noah upstairs. The woman obeyed quickly without speaking much, leading them through endless hallways lined with old family photographs. Claire noticed one thing repeatedly. Children. Photographs of boys and girls appeared throughout the mansion, but many frames looked intentionally removed from the walls. Empty spaces remained where pictures once existed. Dust outlines marked missing memories, carefully erased over time. The mansion carried grief inside its walls. By the time Claire reached her assigned suite, exhaustion had begun crushing her emotionally. The room itself looked larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake. Expensive furniture surrounded a massive fireplace burning softly against the cold night. But no amount of luxury disguised the truth. The bedroom door locked from the outside. Claire tested it twice after the servant left. A prison wrapped in silk still remained a prison. She helped Noah back into bed while trying to hide her fear. He asked quiet questions about where they were and why so many guards stood outside the room. Claire lied gently, pretending everything would be temporary. Inside, panic consumed her. She barely slept that night. The following morning revealed the true rhythm of the Moretti mansion: controlled silence. Servants moved carefully like people terrified of making mistakes. Guards communicated through earpieces while monitoring every hallway. Expensive cars arrived throughout the day carrying politicians, judges, and wealthy businessmen who entered private offices hidden deeper inside the estate. Nobody laughed naturally. Nobody relaxed. Even the air inside the mansion felt tense. Claire noticed the cameras everywhere now, hidden inside ceiling corners, behind paintings, inside decorative lamps. Vincent monitored everything, including her, especially Noah. That realization became undeniable during breakfast. Claire sat beside Noah inside a private dining room when Vincent entered unexpectedly. The entire staff immediately straightened with visible fear. One young servant accidentally spilled coffee while placing dishes onto the table. The room froze instantly. Claire expected Vincent to explode with anger. Instead, he calmly cleaned the spilled coffee himself before dismissing the terrified employee without punishment. The reaction shocked everyone present, especially the staff. Noah watched Vincent carefully while eating breakfast. Unlike adults, children often judge people differently. Vincent's terrifying reputation meant nothing to him yet. That became obvious when Noah quietly offered Vincent one of the strawberries. The entire room stopped breathing. Claire's pulse nearly exploded from fear. Nobody interacted casually with Vincent Moretti. But Vincent stared at the small strawberry for several seconds before accepting it silently. For the briefest moment, something human crossed his cold expression. The servants looked disturbed by it. Claire felt disturbed too, because monsters were easier to understand than emotionally broken men pretending to remain monsters. Later that afternoon, Claire finally met Vanessa DeMarco. Vanessa entered the mansion wearing expensive white designer, clothing that made the staff immediately nervous. Beautiful, elegant, and emotionally poisonous beneath her perfect appearance, Vanessa carried herself like a woman used to controlling every room she entered. Claire immediately sensed hatred behind her smile. Vanessa had clearly expected to stand beside Vincent eventually. Claire and Noah represented threats she did not understand. The tension became obvious quickly. Vanessa insulted Claire subtly throughout lunch while discussing social status, education, and certain women who became dangerous when allowed near powerful men. Her comments carried traces of hidden racism and elite cruelty disguised beneath sophistication. Claire recognized the behavior instantly. Women like Vanessa enjoyed reminding poorer women they did not belong. Vincent ignored most of the conversation coldly until Vanessa mentioned Noah directly. Children raised around violence usually become violent themselves, she said casually while sipping wine. The atmosphere changed immediately. Vincent lowered his glass slowly. Be careful discussing children inside my home. Vanessa's smile faded slightly. Claire noticed fear cross her face for the first time. Even Vanessa understood there were invisible lines around Vincent now, and somehow Noah stood at the center of them. That evening, Claire began quietly investigating the mansion. Fear created curiosity. Curiosity created dangerous decisions. While Noah slept, Claire explored nearby hallways searching for answers about Vincent's brother and the strange connection surrounding her son. She discovered hidden family photographs inside locked display rooms, showing Vincent as a teenager beside another younger boy. The resemblance shocked her. The younger brother looked painfully similar to Noah. Not identical, but close enough to disturb her deeply. Claire also noticed one more horrifying detail. The younger brother disappeared from later photographs entirely, as if he had been erased from family history. Footsteps suddenly echoed nearby. Claire quickly hid behind a doorway as two guards passed through the corridor, discussing rival mafia organizations. Their conversation revealed dangerous rumors spreading across Chicago already. People were questioning Noah's identity. Some believed the boy represented a hidden heir connected to the Moretti bloodline. Others feared Vincent might be emotionally compromised for the first time in years. Both possibilities threatened the empire. Claire returned toward her room, shaken emotionally, only to discover Vincent standing quietly beside Noah's bedroom doorway, watching over him. The sight unsettled her deeply. Vincent looked almost haunted, staring at the sleeping child. He trusts people too easily, Vincent said without looking at Claire. He's 6. That is why the world becomes dangerous. Claire studied Vincent carefully beneath the dim hallway light. Exhaustion lined his face tonight. Not physical exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. You really think my son is connected to your family? Claire whispered. Vincent remained silent several seconds. My younger brother disappeared 20 years ago, he finally answered. The people responsible destroyed records, witnesses, and entire families to bury what happened. Claire felt cold suddenly. And now, Vincent slowly looked toward her. Now your son appears carrying the same blood mark my family carried for generations. Fear settled heavily between them. Claire wanted to deny everything, but missing hospital paperwork suddenly replayed inside her mind. Strange nurses, unexplained signatures, the doctor who vanished weeks after Noah's birth. Too many things no longer felt accidental. That night, Claire could not sleep again. Paranoia consumed the mansion like disease. Guards increased patrols outside the suite. Politicians arrived after midnight, carrying locked briefcases into Vincent's private office. Raised voices echoed through distant hallways before disappearing abruptly. Something larger was happening beneath the surface. At nearly 3 a.m, Claire noticed one servant leaving Vincent's office, carrying medical documents. Instinct pushed her forward before fear stopped her. She followed quietly through the dark hallway until the servant disappeared downstairs. Claire entered the office alone. The room smelled like whiskey, smoke, and old paper. Financial records covered the desk beside family photographs and surveillance reports. Then Claire noticed a file. Noah Bennett. Her hands trembled opening it. Inside sat hospital documents from 6 years earlier. Original birth records. Altered signatures. Changed blood types. And one sentence highlighted in red ink froze her completely. Patient identity modified under emergency authorization order. Claire turned another page slowly. The document revealed Noah's original surname had not been Bennett. It had been Moretti. And attached beside the paperwork sat an official medical report proving someone changed her son's birth records only hours after he was born. Claire thought Vincent Moretti was a monster until she discovered the real evil had been hiding beneath his empire for decades. The medical file remained trembling in Claire Bennett's hands long after the mansion hallway outside Vincent's office fell silent again. Noah Moretti. The name burned into her thoughts like a wound refusing to close. For 6 years, she had believed her son belonged only to her. Every struggle, every hospital visit, every sleepless night raising him alone had shaped her entire identity around protecting him from the cruelty of the world. Now that world suddenly looked far larger and far more dangerous than she ever imagined. Claire forced herself to breathe while staring at the altered documents spread across Vincent's desk. Original birth certificates had been replaced. Hospital signatures forged. Blood records modified under sealed authorization. Orders connected to private government officials. Someone powerful had erased Noah's true identity deliberately, and Vincent Moretti had clearly spent years searching for answers. The sound of approaching footsteps snapped Claire from her thoughts. She quickly returned the documents exactly where she found them moments before Vincent entered the office quietly. He immediately noticed the tension on her face. Vincent always noticed everything. Neither spoke initially. Rain continued striking the mansion windows, while dim office lamps cast long shadows across financial reports scattered around the room. Claire expected anger after being caught inside his private office. Instead, Vincent looked tired. Not physically tired. Emotionally exhausted. "You read the files," he said calmly. Claire did not deny it. "My son's last name was changed." Vincent remained silent several seconds before walking toward the large window overlooking the dark lake beyond the estate. "Yes." The simple answer terrified her more than denial would have. Claire felt anger rising beneath her fear now. "Who changed it?" "That," Vincent answered quietly, "is what I've been trying to uncover for 20 years. Claire studied him carefully. For the first time since entering the Moretti world, she noticed something deeper beneath Vincent's terrifying reputation. The man standing before her no longer resembled a cold mafia king, controlling politicians and killers through fear. He looked haunted, like someone still trapped inside a nightmare that never truly ended. Vincent opened a hidden drawer beneath the desk and removed several old photographs and financial records. He spread them carefully across the table between them. Claire slowly approached. The photographs revealed children, dozens of children. Most looked frightened. Some appeared sick. Others stood beside wealthy politicians during private events hidden from public cameras. Claire's stomach twisted immediately. "What is this?" Vincent's expression darkened. The real empire. Claire looked closer at the documents surrounding the photographs. Offshore bank transfers connected senators, judges, police commissioners, and corporate executives to hidden organizations buried beneath legitimate charities and adoption programs. The deeper she looked, the worse everything became. Children had been trafficked through fake medical foundations for decades. Political blackmail financed entire criminal networks. Wealthy elites bought silence, while innocent families disappeared quietly across Chicago and New York. Claire suddenly understood something horrifying. Vincent Moretti was dangerous, but he was not the worst monster involved. The true evil wore government suits and attended charity galas pretending to protect society. "You knew about this?" Claire whispered. Vincent's jaw tightened. "My father helped build portions of the system years ago. By the time I inherited the organization, the corruption had spread into judges, federal agencies, hospitals, and political offices." Claire stepped backward slowly, overwhelmed emotionally. "And your brother?" Vincent stared silently at one photograph, showing a teenage boy standing beside an older nurse. "My younger brother, Luca, disappeared after discovering children were being moved through one of our shipping networks." The pain in Vincent's voice remained controlled, but Claire heard it clearly now. "He tried exposing them?" Vincent nodded once. He was 13. The answer shattered something inside her. For years, rumors claimed Vincent's younger brother died during a mafia conflict, but the truth sounded far worse. A child had uncovered corruption powerful enough to threaten governments. And then he vanished. Claire suddenly remembered Noah's altered birth records again. Fear tightened around her chest. "You think Noah is connected to your brother?" Vincent looked toward her carefully. "I think someone spent years hiding bloodlines connected to the Moretti family." Before Claire could respond, the office doors opened sharply. A tall man wearing a dark federal overcoat entered beside two armed security guards. Unlike most visitors, he showed no fear toward Vincent. That alone made Claire uneasy immediately. "This is Daniel Cross," Vincent said coldly. "Federal investigator." Daniel Cross carried the polished appearance of someone who belonged inside courtrooms and government offices rather than mafia estates. Sharp gray eyes studied everything carefully, while traces of exhaustion lined his face. But Claire noticed something darker beneath his calm expression. Calculation. Daniel acknowledged Claire briefly before placing a thick folder onto Vincent's desk. 3 more judges connected to the trafficking accounts disappeared this morning, he said. "Someone inside the network is cleaning evidence faster than expected." Claire froze. A federal investigator working directly beside a mafia boss should have felt impossible. Instead, Both men looked disturbingly familiar with each other. Daniel finally looked toward Claire properly. So this is the woman everyone is preparing to kill over. The statement sent ice through her veins. Vincent's expression hardened instantly. She stays under my protection. Daniel almost smiled. That protection may become the reason every rival family in America comes after you. The room grew tense. Claire understood now how deep the corruption truly spread. Federal agents and organized crime leaders no longer existed on opposite sides. The system itself had collapsed into something rotten decades earlier. Daniel opened additional files revealing surveillance photographs, financial transfers, and encrypted communications tied to powerful political figures. One image made Claire stop breathing. A Chicago senator stood beside the same hospital where Noah had been born. Another photograph showed Vanessa DeMarco attending a private fundraiser connected to missing children investigations. Claire felt sick. Everyone around her seemed connected somehow. Everyone carried secrets. As days passed inside the mansion, paranoia consumed the estate completely. Security increased around Noah constantly. Guards monitored every hallway. Vincent trusted almost nobody now. Rival Mafia families began questioning why the Fear Moretti boss suddenly protected a waitress and her child with military-level security. Rumors spread quickly through Chicago's criminal world. Some believed Noah represented the surviving heir of the Moretti bloodline. Others believed Vincent had finally lost emotional control. Both possibilities threatened the empire equally. Claire noticed changes inside Vincent, too. His coldness remained, but cracks had begun appearing beneath it. At night, she occasionally found him standing outside Noah's room watching silently through the doorway. Once, she discovered old drawings spread across his office desk beside photographs of his missing brother. Vincent carried guilt like a permanent scar. Claire hated herself for beginning to sympathize with him, because sympathy toward dangerous men usually destroyed women completely. Meanwhile, Vanessa DeMarco became increasingly hostile. She manipulated elite social circles against Claire constantly, spreading rumors that Claire intentionally trapped Vincent using the child. Wealthy women visiting the mansion openly mocked Claire's background, her clothes, and her status as a single mother. The hidden racism and class hatred beneath their insults became impossible to ignore. Claire endured it quietly for Noah's sake. But Vincent noticed every insult, and every time he noticed, fear spread across the room instantly. One evening during dinner, a corrupt businessman mocked Noah's appearance while discussing street blood poisoning powerful families. The dining room became silent immediately. Vincent calmly continued drinking wine for several seconds before standing. Without warning, he smashed the businessman's face into a marble table hard enough to shatter crystal glasses across the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Blood spread across white tablecloths while guards dragged the screaming man away. Vincent simply adjusted his cuffs afterward and resumed eating. Claire realized then why the city feared him so deeply. Violence never raised his heartbeat. That same night, Daniel Cross privately warned Claire the situation inside the mansion was becoming unstable. Rival organizations think your son threatens inheritance structures connected to Moretti assets, he explained carefully. If Noah truly belongs to Vincent's bloodline somehow, entire criminal alliances could collapse. Claire stared at him in horror. He's a child. Daniel's expression darkened. That has never stopped powerful people before. The emotional weight of everything began crushing Claire slowly. Every answer uncovered darker questions. Every truth revealed more corruption buried beneath it. Yet despite the fear consuming the mansion, emotional trust slowly developed between her and Vincent. Not romance. Something more dangerous. Understanding. Claire began seeing the lonely man hidden beneath the feared criminal empire. Vincent noticed how fiercely she protected Noah despite exhaustion, fear, and impossible circumstances. Both recognized pain inside each other. That recognition became its own weakness. One stormy evening, Claire searched the mansion archives while Noah slept nearby under guard protection. She hoped to uncover records connected to the hospital that altered Noah's birth identity. Instead, she discovered something far worse. Hidden behind false accounting ledgers sat old cassette recordings labeled with dates from 20 years earlier. One tape already waited inside the recorder. Claire pressed play carefully. Static filled the room first. Then voices emerged. A terrified nurse begged someone not to proceed. Another voice answered coldly. Claire immediately recognized it as belonging to a senior Moretti lieutenant still working inside Vincent's organization today. The next sentence froze her blood completely. Take the child tonight. Vincent can never discover the boy survived. The moment rival Mafia leaders realized Vincent would protect Claire and her child at any cost, they quietly signed all 3 of their death warrants. The recording continued spinning inside the tape player long after Claire Bennett stopped breathing normally. Static crackled to the dark archive room, while the terrified nurse on the recording begged for mercy. Then another voice responded with horrifying calmness. If Vincent discovers the boy survived, the Empire collapses. The tape abruptly ended. Claire stared at the machine in complete silence while thunder rolled outside the mansion windows. Every terrifying possibility now connected itself together with brutal clarity. Someone had kidnapped a child years ago. Someone inside Vincent Moretti's empire had hidden the truth deliberately, and somehow Noah stood directly in the center of it all. The realization destroyed the fragile sense of safety Claire had been trying to build around her son. Before she could process the recording further, the archive room door opened sharply behind her. Vincent entered. His expression immediately darkened after noticing the cassette player. For several long seconds, neither spoke. Claire slowly turned toward him, her face pale from shock and emotional exhaustion. "You knew," she whispered. Vincent's eyes lowered briefly toward the tape recorder before returning to her. "I suspected." The answer hit harder than anger would have. Claire stepped backward. "My son is being hunted because of your empire." Vincent remained motionless beneath the dim archive lights. Rain shadows moved across his face while silence filled the room heavily between them. "No," he answered quietly. "Your son is being hunted because powerful men spent 20 years trying to erase what he represents." Claire hated how calm he remained while her entire world collapsed around her. Outside the archive room, the mansion had already begun changing. Fear spread to the estate faster than rumors ever could. Security doubled overnight. Armed guards monitored every hallway leading toward Noah's room. Vincent's trusted men rotated patrols constantly while surveillance systems scanned every corner of the property. Even longtime mansion staff whispered nervously now whenever Claire or her son passed nearby. Everyone understood the truth. Claire and Noah had become weaknesses inside the Moretti Empire, and weakness inside organized crime usually ended in blood. Within days, assassination threats arrived openly. The first came through anonymous letters delivered to the mansion gates. The second appeared through encrypted messages sent directly to Vincent's private security network. The third arrived publicly during a televised political fundraiser attended by senators, judges, and wealthy business leaders connected to criminal operations. A smiling politician casually referred to Noah as an unfortunate complication during a live interview before cameras suddenly cut away. The threat had become public. Claire watched the broadcast from Vincent's office while nausea twisted inside her stomach. Powerful people were no longer hiding their intentions. They wanted her child dead. And the worst part was realizing how normal everyone acted about it. Politicians continued smiling at charity events. News anchors continued discussing stock markets and elections. Meanwhile, wealthy elites quietly debated whether a little boy should survive long enough to threaten hidden power structures. Claire finally understood the true horror of corruption. Evil rarely looked monstrous in public. Most of the time, it wore expensive suits and polite smiles. The media manipulation spread quickly afterward. Several national news outlets suddenly published stories accusing Claire of manipulating Vincent Moretti emotionally to gain access to criminal wealth. Anonymous sources claimed she intentionally used Noah to trap the feared Mafia boss into protecting her. Elite social circles repeated the rumors constantly. Vanessa DeMarco ensured that happened personally. The elegant women surrounding Vincent's world already hated Claire's presence. Vanessa transformed that hatred into organized humiliation. During a private charity event hosted inside a luxury hotel ballroom, Claire became the target of whispered insults and subtle public cruelty disguised as sophistication. Women wearing diamond necklaces and designer gowns openly mocked her background while pretending to discuss politics and philanthropy. Some referred to her as the restaurant girl. Others questioned whether someone from her neighborhood even understood proper parenting. The hidden racism beneath their words became sharper as the evening continued. One wealthy socialite quietly implied that women like Claire always brought violence into powerful families. Another suggested Noah probably inherited criminal blood. Claire stood silently through most of it, but emotionally, she was breaking apart. Everything she once believed about hard work, survival, and protecting her child felt meaningless against people capable of destroying lives with simple conversations over champagne. Across the ballroom, Vincent watched everything, and everyone noticed him watching. That frightened them more than his violence ever had. For years, Vincent Moretti ruled through fear, calculation, and emotional detachment. He protected businesses, territories, and power structures. Never people, especially not vulnerable people. But now he watched Claire and Noah differently, possessively, that terrified rival organizations across the country, because emotional attachment made powerful men unpredictable, and unpredictable mafia kings destroyed empires. The pressure against Vincent intensified publicly after that night. A massive summit meeting between rival mafia leaders took place inside an underground Manhattan club hidden beneath a luxury hotel. Politicians, crime bosses, businessmen, and federal intermediaries attended secretly under armed security. Claire remained inside the mansion during the meeting, but the tension reached her through every frightened phone call and security update. Rival leaders demanded Vincent surrender Claire and Noah immediately. They argued the child threatened financial alliances buried beneath decades of corruption, old bloodlines, hidden inheritances, trafficking networks, and political leverage, all connected somehow to Noah's existence. Vincent refused every demand, and for the first time in years, powerful men openly challenged him. Inside the summit, one rival leader reportedly warned Vincent that protecting Claire would burn the entire empire to the ground. Vincent answered by placing a gun on the negotiation table beside him. The message required no explanation. By midnight, preparations for war had already begun quietly across New York and Chicago. Inside the mansion, fear infected everyone. Security guards checked windows obsessively. Servants avoided speaking above whispers. Several longtime employees resigned suddenly, without explanation. Others disappeared entirely. Claire noticed panic spreading through the estate like invisible poison. Noah noticed it too. The child stopped sleeping properly. He clung closer to Claire whenever unfamiliar guards entered rooms. Even his drawings changed, replacing bright colors with dark storm clouds and faceless figures standing outside windows. Claire's heart shattered, watching fear slowly steal childhood from her son. One evening, she finally broke emotionally. She found herself crying silently inside the mansion greenhouse while rain hammered against glass ceilings overhead. Years of exhaustion, paranoia, humiliation, and terror finally crushed through the emotional walls she had built around herself. Vincent found her there eventually. He stood several feet away initially, saying nothing. Claire wiped tears angrily from her face. "This is never going to end," she whispered. Vincent looked toward the rain outside. "No," he answered honestly. The truth hurt more because he refused to lie. Claire studied him carefully in the dim greenhouse lighting. The feared mafia king looked exhausted too now. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His expensive suit jacket carried traces of blood near one cuff from another violent confrontation earlier that evening. Yet despite everything happening around them, he remained standing, still protecting her, still protecting Noah. Claire realized something dangerous then. She trusted him, not because he was safe, not because he was innocent, but because every other powerful person in her life had hidden behind politeness while planning destruction. Vincent never pretended to be good, and somehow that honesty felt safer than the lies surrounding everyone else. Their emotional connection deepened quietly after that night, not through dramatic confessions or romantic promises, through sacrifice. Vincent personally walked Noah to secured playrooms each morning despite endless criminal meetings waiting for him. Claire noticed fresh bruises appearing on Vincent's hands almost daily now, evidence of growing violence inside the organization. Meanwhile, Claire began helping Daniel Cross organize hidden financial evidence, exposing trafficking operations tied to senators and judges. She understood now that survival required fighting back somehow. The mansion slowly transformed into a fortress, preparing for collapse. Then the betrayals began. Encrypted security reports revealed someone inside Vincent's inner circle leaked guard rotations to rival organizations. Several safe houses connected to Claire were compromised before she ever reached them. Vincent responded ruthlessly. 3 suspected traitors vanished overnight. Nobody asked questions afterward, but Claire noticed something terrifying during those days. Vincent's violence no longer frightened her the way it once had, because compared to the corruption surrounding them, his brutality almost felt honest. That realization disturbed her deeply. Then came the storm. Rain crashed across Chicago violently, while thunder shook the mansion windows after midnight. Security teams remained tense after intercepted communications warned of possible attacks against the estate. Claire slept lightly beside Noah's room, while armed guards monitored hallways nearby. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the mansion lights flickered once. Then darkness swallowed the corridor. Claire immediately sat upright. Something felt wrong. The thunder outside suddenly stopped sounding natural. It sounded closer, sharper, like explosions hidden inside the storm. She rushed toward Noah's bedroom just as emergency backup lights activated dimly across the hallway. And then it happened. A deafening gunshot exploded through the night. Glass shattered violently across the child's bedroom as a sniper bullet tore through the window directly above Noah's bed. The second Vincent carried Claire's frightened son into the ballroom. Every criminal leader in New York realized the feared Mafia boss was finally losing control. The sniper attack changed everything inside the Moretti empire. After the bullet tore through Noah's bedroom window, Vincent transformed from a feared Mafia leader into something far more dangerous. A man protecting the only people he still cared about. And everyone around him noticed immediately. Within 48 hours, the criminal underworld began preparing for war. The annual Black Rose Summit had already been scheduled before the assassination attempt. Every major Mafia family, corrupt politician, federal intermediary, and billionaire financier connected to organized crime would gather inside the Moretti estate for a private diplomatic event hidden beneath the appearance of a charity celebration. Normally, Vincent treated such gatherings like business transactions, controlled, predictable, emotionally detached. This time was different, because this time, he arrived carrying Noah in his arms. The moment Vincent entered the grand ballroom with Claire walking beside him, silence spread across the massive hall almost instantly. Crystal chandeliers glowed above hundreds of powerful guests dressed in dark luxury, while orchestral music played softly in the background. Senators stood beside cartel financiers. Judges drank champagne with human traffickers, pretending to be philanthropists. But none of them focused on politics anymore. They focused on Vincent Moretti and the terrified child holding tightly onto his shoulder. Fear moved through the ballroom like poison, not fear of violence, fear of emotional weakness. For years, Vincent built his empire by appearing untouchable. He ruled through calm brutality and absolute emotional control. Rivals feared him because nothing seemed capable of affecting him personally. Now everyone watched him protect a woman and child publicly. That terrified them more than murder ever could. Claire felt the tension immediately while walking beside him. Every eye inside the ballroom followed Noah. Some guests looked confused. Others looked horrified. Several Mafia leaders exchanged nervous glances after recognizing the child's resemblance to old Moretti family photographs hidden away decades earlier. The realization spread quietly through the room. The rumors were true. Noah mattered. And if Noah mattered, entire criminal alliances built across 20 years suddenly stood on unstable ground. Claire held herself together carefully despite the overwhelming pressure surrounding her. Expensive gowns and political smiles no longer intimidated her the way they once had. Now she saw these people clearly. Predators hiding beneath elegance. Vanessa DeMarco stood near the ballroom staircase, watching Claire with carefully concealed hatred. Dressed in silver silk and diamonds, she looked every bit the perfect social queen of organized crime. but her expression darkened visibly the moment Vincent guided Claire toward the center of the ballroom, instead of leaving her hidden behind security. Vanessa understood the symbolism immediately. Vincent was no longer protecting Claire privately. He was claiming her publicly. That single decision destabilized everything. Daniel Cross arrived shortly afterward, accompanied by several federal officials pretending to attend as political donors. Unlike most guests, Daniel moved comfortably between criminal leaders and government figures alike. Claire noticed something disturbing watching him. The federal investigator belonged in both worlds too easily. He shook hands with senators one moment and whispered quietly beside armed mafia captains the next. Nobody fully trusted him. Yet everyone continued working with him anyway, because corruption had infected every side equally. The ballroom itself resembled a battlefield disguised as luxury. Hidden weapons rested beneath tailored jackets. Security teams monitored exits constantly. Politicians smiled for photographs while secretly negotiating illegal financial protections behind closed doors. Every conversation carried double meanings. Every glance hid suspicion. And through all of it, Vincent remained focused on Claire and Noah. That frightened rival families more with every passing minute. Claire noticed signs of strain appearing inside Vincent for the first time since entering his world. His normally controlled expression seemed tighter tonight. Dark shadows lingered beneath his eyes from sleepless nights after the sniper attack. More importantly, he kept checking Noah constantly, as though terrified the child might disappear if left unguarded even briefly. The emotional hook spread through the ballroom quietly. The most feared mafia king in America was finally afraid, and fear made powerful men unpredictable. During dinner service, psychological warfare unfolded openly across the ballroom. One corrupt senator casually referenced bloodline complications while discussing inheritance law reforms. A rival mafia leader joked about how children connected to dangerous families rarely survive adulthood. Another wealthy businessman subtly questioned whether Claire even understood the consequences of raising someone born into cursed blood. Every comment targeted Noah indirectly. Every insult tested Vincent's reaction. Claire felt rage and helplessness mixing together inside her, while wealthy elites discussed her son like a political problem instead of a child. The hidden racism and class hatred intensified throughout the evening, too. Several elite women refused to acknowledge Claire directly despite openly greeting politicians connected to murder investigations. Others whispered loudly enough for Claire to hear comments about women from her background manipulating powerful men through pity and desperation. Vanessa encouraged all of it carefully. She moved through the ballroom, spreading rumors strategically, quietly suggesting Claire intentionally used Noah's identity to destabilize the Moretti empire. But despite the humiliation surrounding her, Claire noticed something unexpected happening emotionally. Vincent never left her side. Not once. Every subtle insult directed toward Claire caused visible tension among the security teams because everyone knew Vincent was close to losing control. And eventually, he did. The breaking point came during a speech delivered by a powerful New York judge secretly connected to trafficking networks. While discussing criminal stability and protecting future generations, the judge publicly implied that Noah represented a threat to national security because of his bloodline. The ballroom became silent instantly. Claire saw Vincent's expression change immediately. Not rage. Something colder. More dangerous. For years, criminal leaders survived because Vincent treated violence like business. But tonight felt personal. The judge continued speaking confidently until Vincent interrupted by smashing a crystal glass hard enough to silence the entire ballroom. Blood spread across Vincent's hand from shattered glass fragments. Yet he barely noticed. He stared directly at the judge. And for the first time in years, people saw genuine emotion behind the feared mafia boss's eyes. Hatred, raw and uncontrolled. Security teams across the ballroom instinctively reached for hidden weapons. Nobody moved further. Nobody even breathed loudly, because everyone sensed how close the empire stood to collapsing. Daniel Cross intervened carefully before violence erupted publicly. He guided several politicians away while quietly warning federal officials that tensions inside the estate had become unstable. But Claire noticed something else. Daniel seemed nervous too now. as though events were moving beyond even his control. Meanwhile, Noah unknowingly became the emotional center of the entire confrontation. The child sat quietly beside Claire through most of the evening, confused by the hostility surrounding him, yet trying bravely not to show fear. At one point, he accidentally dropped a small wooden toy beside the ballroom dance floor. Vincent picked it up personally before kneeling briefly to hand it back. That single moment changed everything, because dozens of powerful men witnessed the impossible. Vincent Moretti showing tenderness. The psychological effects spread instantly. Rival leaders understood then that Vincent would sacrifice his empire before surrendering Claire or Noah, which meant war was no longer avoidable. As the evening progressed, hidden betrayals inside the mansion grew increasingly obvious. Several security cameras suddenly malfunctioned throughout restricted areas. Encrypted communications disappeared from internal systems. Armed guards loyal to rival organizations quietly repositioned themselves near ballroom exits. Someone inside Vincent's inner circle had compromised the estate completely. Claire felt the tension building toward disaster with every passing minute. Still, emotional intimacy between her and Vincent deepened silently through the chaos surrounding them, not through dramatic romance, through loyalty. At one point during the ballroom gathering, Noah fell asleep against Vincent's shoulder while politicians argued nearby about financial damage control and federal investigations. Vincent continued holding the child carefully through the entire meeting, despite the dangerous negotiations happening around him. Claire watched him quietly from across the room, and for the first time, she no longer saw only a mafia boss. She saw a man carrying unbearable guilt, a man trying desperately to protect what remained of his broken family. That realization terrified her emotionally because her feelings toward Vincent had become impossible to deny. Outside the ballroom, rival families finalized coordinated attack plans. Armed teams surrounded the estate slowly under cover of rain, and political transportation convoys arriving throughout the night. Inside, music still played softly while champagne glasses clinked beneath chandeliers. But the empire had already started falling apart. Then came the final betrayal. Vanessa disappeared briefly from a ballroom before security systems across the mansion suddenly shut down completely. Emergency backup lights activated seconds later. Dark red illumination spread across the estate hallways like warning signals. Every armed guard inside the ballroom immediately reacted. Vincent stood instantly, pulling Claire and Noah closer behind him. Daniel Cross cursed quietly while checking encrypted messages flooding his phone. Rival leaders reached for concealed weapons beneath dining tables. And then the massive ballroom doors slammed shut automatically. Electronic locks engaged with a deafening metallic sound. Silence swallowed the room for one horrifying second, before armed men surrounded the entire estate from outside. By sunrise, the mansion floors were covered in blood, and Claire finally understood why nobody survived loving a mafia king. The moment the ballroom doors locked, panic spread through the estate like wildfire. Crystal chandeliers still glowed above terrified politicians and mafia leaders, but the elegant atmosphere shattered instantly beneath the sound of automatic gunfire erupting outside the mansion walls. Screams replaced orchestral music. Security teams drew weapons simultaneously, while guests rushed backward from the sealed exits in confusion and terror. Several senators dropped beneath dining tables, while rival mafia captains shouted orders at armed bodyguards already preparing for combat. The Moretti Empire had officially entered open war. Claire instinctively pulled Noah closer against her chest, while Vincent moved directly in front of them both. His entire demeanor changed within seconds. Every trace of emotional vulnerability vanished from his expression. The feared Mafia king returned instantly, cold, focused, merciless. But this time Claire noticed something different beneath his violence. Desperation. Vincent understood the attack was not simply about territory or power anymore. It was about Noah, and powerful men destroyed entire cities to protect bloodlines. Gunshots exploded again somewhere deeper inside the mansion. The sound echoed violently through marble hallways while emergency lights painted the ballroom in dark crimson shadows. Then came the first betrayal. Several armed guards stationed beside Vincent suddenly turned their weapons toward him instead of the attackers outside. Traitors. Claire barely had time to react before Vincent fired first. The ballroom erupted into chaos. 3 guards collapsed instantly beneath gunfire, while terrified politicians screamed and scattered across the room. Glass shattered everywhere as bullets tore through chandeliers overhead. Noah buried his face against Claire, while she desperately shielded him from the violence exploding around them. Vincent moved with horrifying precision through the chaos. Claire finally witnessed the full brutality behind his reputation. There was no hesitation inside him, no visible emotion, only survival. Within seconds, armed men loyal to rival organizations stormed through side entrances hidden behind ballroom walls. Some wore security uniforms stolen from the estate itself. The mansion had been compromised long before tonight. Daniel Cross disappeared during the first wave of gunfire. At first, Claire believed he escaped. Then she saw him standing beside federal tactical agents monitoring encrypted communications from a protected balcony overlooking the ballroom. The realization hit her immediately. Daniel had never belonged fully to either side. He manipulated both. Federal investigations, political leaks, mafia negotiations. All of it had served his personal agenda from the beginning. While innocent people died below, Daniel calmly directed operations through a communication headset, treating the massacre like a controlled transaction. Claire understood then how deeply corruption infected the entire system. There were no heroes left, only different kinds of monsters competing for control. Vincent forced Claire and Noah through private corridors behind the ballroom, while gunfire continued spreading throughout the estate. Smoke already drifted through ventilation systems as explosions shook lower sections of the mansion. Servants and security staff ran through hallways screaming. Some never made it far. Claire witnessed innocent workers collapse beside overturned furniture, while bullets tore through marble walls around them. Several longtime employees who once greeted Noah kindly now lay bleeding across hallways destroyed by violence they never created. The emotional devastation hit harder than the gunfire itself. Powerful men started wars. Ordinary people died inside them. As they reached the eastern corridor, Vanessa DeMarco finally revealed her true betrayal openly. She stood waiting beside the mansion's private exit surrounded by rival gunmen. No fear remained in her expression now, only bitterness. Claire realized Vanessa never truly cared about power or money. She wanted Vincent emotionally destroyed. "You ruined everything for him," Vanessa said coldly while staring at Claire. "He ruled this city because he never loved anyone." Vincent slowly stepped forward, shielding Claire and Noah behind him. The atmosphere between them felt deeply personal. Vanessa's voice trembled with restrained rage. "He was untouchable before you arrived." Claire finally understood the tragedy hidden beneath Vanessa's hatred. Years of loyalty meant nothing once Vincent chose someone else to protect. And inside worlds built on violence, rejected loyalty usually transformed into revenge. Vanessa ordered the gunman to fire. The hallway exploded into another massacre. Vincent killed 2 attackers almost instantly before dragging Claire and Noah behind a collapsing marble column as bullets ripped through walls around them. Smoke alarms screamed overhead while flames spread through nearby rooms. Vanessa disappeared during the chaos, but the damage had already been done. Moretti's security systems collapsed entirely moments later. Explosions erupted across the western wing of the mansion as rival organizations breached underground entrances beneath the estate. Federal tactical teams simultaneously raided multiple Moretti properties across Chicago and New York after classified corruption files leaked publicly online. Someone had exposed everything: bank records, trafficking operations, political bribes. Judges, senators, police commissioners, and business leaders connected to criminal networks suddenly flooded national headlines overnight. The empire was collapsing in real time. Television screens throughout the mansion flashed emergency news broadcasts while gunfire echoed behind them. Claire watched one anchor announce federal warrants against powerful politicians she had seen drinking champagne only hours earlier inside the ballroom. Another report confirmed mass arrests tied to child trafficking investigations connected to private charities and medical foundations. The hidden world beneath America's elite had finally begun surfacing publicly, and the entire country was about to burn with it. Meanwhile, Noah witnessed everything. That reality broke Claire emotionally more than the violence itself. The child no longer cried. He simply watched the destruction around him silently with terrified eyes far too old for his age. Each explosion seemed to strip away another piece of his innocence. At one point, Noah quietly asked whether the bad men would ever stop coming. Claire could not answer him, because deep inside, she already knew the truth. Powerful men never stop hunting threats. Not until everything was destroyed. As they moved deeper through emergency tunnels beneath the mansion, Vincent finally revealed hidden truths about Claire's own past. The confession came unexpectedly between explosions shaking the underground corridors. Years earlier, Claire's mother worked inside one of the medical foundations secretly connected to trafficking operations. After discovering children were being moved illegally through falsified hospital systems, she attempted exposing the network quietly. She disappeared shortly afterward. Claire stopped walking entirely. The emotional shock nearly crushed her. My mother knew about them? Vincent's expression darkened. She died trying to protect children the organization wanted erased. Claire suddenly understood why powerful people targeted Noah so aggressively. Her family and Vincent's family had collided years before either of them realized it. Their lives connected through buried crimes, stolen identities, and murdered innocents long before they ever met. Nothing about their relationship was accidental. The realization emotionally devastated Claire because it meant her entire life had been shaped by corruption she never saw coming. Above them, the mansion continued collapsing. Armed conflict spread across every floor, while federal helicopters circled overhead through the storm. Rival families openly attacked Moretti operations citywide after realizing Vincent's empire had become vulnerable publicly. Inside the underground escape corridors, Vincent's remaining loyal guards fought desperately to buy them time. Most never returned. Claire watched Vincent absorb each death silently while continuing forward through smoke-filled tunnels carrying Noah in his arms. The child clung tightly to him now despite the fear surrounding them. And somehow that terrified Claire most of all, because Noah trusted him completely. Eventually they reached an underground vehicle tunnel, leading toward hidden escape routes beneath the estate grounds. For one brief moment, silence returned. Then Daniel Cross appeared again. This time he stood surrounded by armed federal agents and rival gunmen simultaneously. Claire immediately realized the horrifying truth. Daniel intended eliminating every surviving witness from both sides. Federal justice had never been his goal. Control was. "You should have surrendered the child earlier," Daniel said calmly toward Vincent. "Too many powerful people are connected to this bloodline." Vincent slowly handed Noah to Claire before stepping forward alone. The atmosphere became suffocatingly tense. Claire noticed exhaustion finally reaching Vincent physically now. Blood stained portions of his suit, while bruises darkened one side of his face. Yet despite everything collapsing around him, he still stood between her son and danger. The emotional hook shattered Claire internally at that moment. The world called Vincent Moretti a monster, but every respectable man around him seemed far worse. Gunfire erupted again before negotiations could continue. One of Daniel's own agents suddenly turned against him after rival gunmen opened fire unexpectedly from behind the tunnel entrances. Chaos consumed the underground corridor instantly. Bullets ricocheted across concrete walls. Explosions shook the foundation above them. Then the ceiling collapsed. Flames burst through ventilation shafts as the mansion finally began imploding inward from structural damage caused by earlier detonations. Claire screamed as debris crashed around them. A burning support beam fell directly toward Noah. Vincent moved instantly. Without hesitation, he threw himself across the collapsing corridor and pushed Noah safely behind reinforced concrete barriers moments before the explosion tore through the tunnel. The blast swallowed half the underground passage in fire and smoke. Claire lost sight of Vincent completely. Dust and flames consumed everything. Federal agents fled. Rival gunmen disappeared. The Moretti mansion collapsed above them while emergency sirens echoed through the city outside. Claire crawled desperately toward the burning debris, holding Noah tightly against her chest. But Vincent Moretti was gone, vanished somewhere inside the flames after saving her son from the explosion. Vincent Moretti's name had not been spoken openly for months, yet it still lived in fear across every corner of the criminal underworld. After the explosion that destroyed the Moretti mansion, most believed he had finally been erased from existence. But silence in Vincent's world never meant peace. It only meant preparation. Claire Bennett was living a life she no longer recognized as her own. The woman who once tried to survive day by day now lived in constant emotional exhaustion. Every sound outside her home made her tense. Every unfamiliar car slowed near her street felt like a threat. Her son had changed too. The innocence in his behavior had been replaced by quiet awareness, as if even he understood that the world around him was unstable and dangerous. The Moretti Empire, once controlled by Vincent with absolute precision, had fractured completely. Without his presence, power shifted violently between rival families. Alliances collapsed overnight. Loyalty turned into opportunity. Every criminal leader wanted a piece of what was left, and none of them trusted each other enough to share it. The result was chaos spreading across cities that once operated under silent control. Daniel Cross had risen during this instability. What once seemed like a federal investigator's role had transformed into something far more complicated. He now moved between systems of law enforcement and underground negotiations, shaping outcomes rather than reporting them. His influence expanded quietly but dangerously, and people who once ignored him now followed his direction without question. Claire began receiving messages that she could not trace. Sometimes they were written in plain text. Sometimes they were coded in patterns only she seemed to notice. Each message carried the same feeling. She was being watched not by strangers, but by something familiar, something tied to Vincent. At first, she tried to ignore them. She focused on rebuilding a normal routine for her son. School runs, meals, small moments of stability. But normal no longer existed in her reality. The messages continued, always arriving at moments when she was alone, always forcing her mind back into fear. What made it worse was what she had recently discovered about her child. Documents, hidden records, and fragmented files had revealed inconsistencies in his identity. The truth was not fully visible yet, but enough had been uncovered to disturb her deeply. The possibility that her son's life had been shaped before she ever held him made her question everything she believed about her past. Vincent, even in absence, remained the center of all uncertainty. Claire began to realize that his disappearance may not have been an ending. The way certain financial records resurfaced, the way rival families hesitated before making major moves, and the way Daniel Cross avoided confirming Vincent's death all suggested one uncomfortable possibility. Vincent Moretti had not been erased. He had withdrawn. Her emotional state began collapsing under the weight of uncertainty. Fear and attachment existed together in a way she could not separate. She hated what Vincent represented, yet her survival seemed strangely connected to him. The deeper she searched, the more she found traces that pointed not backward to destruction, but forward to planning. Clues began leading her toward a location that had once been ignored by everyone involved in the Moretti network. An abandoned church on the outskirts of the city, forgotten after years of decay. Officially, it held no value. Unofficially, it appeared repeatedly in fragmented records and coded references connected to Vincent's financial network. She did not go there immediately. Fear held her back, but her son began asking questions she could not answer. Simple questions at first, about names and places, then more specific questions about Vincent, questions she had never discussed with him. That shift made her realize something unsettling. Information was reaching him without her control. When she finally decided to approach the location, it was not with certainty, but with exhaustion. The journey itself felt like moving through layers of memory she never lived. The abandoned church stood against the silence of its surroundings like something waiting rather than forgotten. It did not feel empty. It felt paused. Inside, the air carried the weight of time and absence. Dust-covered structures, broken benches, and faded symbols created an environment that felt preserved rather than abandoned. Claire moved carefully, each step making her more aware of how unnatural the silence felt. Her son stayed close, unusually quiet. That silence disturbed her more than fear or noise ever could. It was as if he already sensed something she had not yet confirmed. As she moved deeper into the structure, the atmosphere changed. The emptiness was no longer random. It was arranged. Spaces were too deliberate, pathways too structured, as if the building had been repurposed for something hidden beneath its surface. Her attention shifted toward a section of floor that looked reinforced. Unlike the rest of the structure, it did not decay naturally. It remained intact, maintained. That detail alone made her stop. The realization came slowly but clearly. This was not just an abandoned place. It was a concealment point. Before she could fully process what she was seeing, a presence became visible in the darker part of the cathedral interior. A silhouette standing where light failed to reach fully. Still, familiar in shape but impossible in expectation. Claire froze instantly, unable to move or speak. Her son turned his head slightly toward the figure, as if recognizing something before she did. The air in the room shifted, heavy with recognition and disbelief. The figure did not step forward, but its presence alone was enough to disrupt everything Claire thought she had understood about loss, survival, and truth. Vincent Moretti stood in the deepest part of the abandoned cathedral as the structure around him prepared to become the final battlefield of an empire that had survived on blood, silence, and buried truth. Nothing about this moment resembled power anymore. It resembled consequence. Every decision that had shaped his life was now converging into a single point where survival no longer mattered more than truth. Claire Bennett remained frozen near the entrance, her mind struggling to accept what her eyes confirmed. The man she believed had died, vanished, or been erased was not only alive, but standing in the center of a place that felt like the hidden spine of everything she had ever feared. Her son stayed unusually still beside her, as if the weight of the moment pressed deeper into him than it should have for his age. Vincent's attention was not on the collapsing world outside, nor on the approaching threat of federal forces tightening their grip around the cathedral grounds. His focus remained on the child. Something in the boy's presence carried a truth that had been hidden through layers of manipulation, false records, and carefully constructed silence. The final confrontation was not loud at first. It formed through arrival, through recognition, through the slow realization that every major player in the empire had been drawn to this exact point without fully understanding why. Daniel Cross had positioned himself at the edge of control, believing influence could still shape the outcome. Vanessa DeMarco moved with calculated distance, her loyalty long replaced by ambition. Rival families gathered in fragmented unity, not as allies, but as witnesses to the end of something larger than any of them. The cathedral itself felt like it had been waiting for this moment longer than anyone alive. Its structure, already weakened by time, now reflected the collapse of everything built upon secrecy. Beneath its broken architecture, hidden systems and forgotten passages revealed the infrastructure of a world that had always existed beneath legality. Vincent finally stepped closer to Claire and her son. The distance between them held years of hidden truth, none of which could be corrected without consequence. The child's identity, once obscure through manipulation and protection, now stood at the center of everything. What had been hidden was no longer theoretical. It was present, breathing, and watching. The truth about the child's origin had never been a simple secret. It had been the foundation of a war that never ended. Bloodlines, betrayals, and erased records had all been used to control outcomes that powerful families thought they owned. Vincent's connection to the boy was not symbolic. It was direct, painful, and irreversible. Daniel Cross attempted to move closer, but the shifting alliances inside the cathedral had already begun to collapse. His authority, built on unstable compromise, could no longer hold against the exposure unfolding in real time. Vanessa's attempts to manipulate remaining factions failed as fear replaced ambition among those watching the final convergence. Outside the cathedral, the first signs of national collapse were already in motion. Financial systems tied to criminal networks were being exposed simultaneously across multiple states. Political figures who had protected the empire for years were forced into defensive silence as evidence surfaced faster than it could be controlled. The illusion of separation between legality and crime finally broke. Inside, Vincent's expression changed in a way no one had seen before. It was no longer the expression of a man built on control. It was the expression of someone who had already accepted loss. Everything he had built, everything he had protected through violence and silence, had led here, and at the center of it was a child who represented something he could no longer preserve through force. Claire finally understood what she had been resisting. Vincent's actions were not driven by ownership or domination. They were shaped by protection that had outlived morality. survival that had outlived meaning, and guilt that had outlived time. The empire falling around them was not an accident. It was a final stage of something he had set in motion long before she ever entered his world. The child stepped slightly forward, not afraid, but aware. That movement shifted everything in the room. The remaining power structures, already weakened, began to fracture completely. What had once been an empire, fear now responded to something simpler and more dangerous than fear itself. Truth without protection. Vincent extended his hand toward the child, not as a claim, but as acknowledgement. In that moment, everything he had done, every loss, every calculated decision, every buried crime, collapsed into a single realization that survival had never been the goal. Meaning had been. Claire's breath tightened as she watched the connection form between them. The world she had been trying to understand no longer made sense through violence or betrayal alone. It made sense through inheritance, through consequences passed forward instead of resolved backward. The cathedral trembled under the weight of external forces closing in. Federal units had fully surrounded the structure, cutting off all escape routes. The final stage of exposure had begun beyond the walls, where systems of power were being dismantled in real time. Inside, however, the collapse was quieter, more personal, more irreversible. Daniel Cross attempted one final maneuver to regain control of the situation, but the structure of influence he relied on had already disintegrated. Vanessa, stripped of manipulation and protection, faced the consequences of alliances that no longer held value. The empire that once elevated them was now the thing dragging them down. Vincent's focus remained on Claire and her son as the final weight of decision settled into him. Everything he had avoided confronting had arrived at once. Power no longer offered escape. Revenge no longer offered resolution. Only sacrifice remained as a path that could still change what was left of the world they were standing in. He stepped back slightly, not away from them, but away from the outcome that would keep them trapped in the cycle he had spent his life trying to control. That single movement carried the full meaning of his choice. Not ownership, not escape, release. The cathedral doors were breached from the outside as federal forces moved in, sealing the perimeter and initiating final containment procedures. Light from the outside spilled into the collapsing interior, mixing with dust and shadow, turning the entire space into something between judgment and memory. In the final moment before everything ended, Vincent looked at Claire one last time. No explanation could reduce what had happened between them. No truth could simplify it. Only understanding remained, fragile but real. Claire realized then that survival was no longer about escaping him or the Empire. It was about carrying forward what had been protected at unbearable cost. As federal agents surrounded the burning cathedral, Claire realized Vincent Moretti's body was never recovered from the ruins.